Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to make my contribution on the debates for Budget 2023, permit me first of all to express best wishes to the Guyanese people for the year 2023, to express birthday greetings to those celebrating their birthdays, and anyone who may be celebrating an event or, in the case, lost a loved one. I express my sincere condolences to such person. Mr. Speaker, I just have two comments on my previous speaker contribution. As a matter of fact, it's a question, and this is from the Guyanese point of view. It would be useful to find out from the Honorable Kwame McCoy where exactly he got such a cheap oil from. Secondly, forgive me if I did not hear the honorable member correctly, but did he just confirm that to the people of Guyana that all the ministers of the government are a bunch of tourists? Mr. Speaker, an active outreach calendar by this government with a slush fund of $5 billion has not enhanced the relevance of local authorities. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say thanks to the staff of the Ministry of Finance for their continuous work in preparation for Budget 2023. I also want to thank the Honorable Minister of Finance for standing for more than 5 hours to read Budget 2023. However, I wish to remind the Honorable Minister of Finance that the people of Guyana is not impressed and would not judge Budget 2023 by how long he can stand and read. Rather, they will judge the budget by how appreciable and preeminent the measures included will be. I'm also reminded by a statement made by the Minister of Finance while on a program with the newsroom. So a large portion or a large part of the budget will be about addressing main irritants, the things that affect people in their day-to-day lives. Mr. Speaker, it begs the question, does the minister really understand what the day-to-day lives of the ordinary Guyanese is like? Mr. Speaker, if nothing else, the people of Guyana eagerly were looking forward to Budget 2023 since it included a substantial amount of the oil revenues for the first time. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, this budget is more than 40%, an increase from the previous budget. And so the people were eagerly looking forward to this budget with patience, with much enthusiasm. Sad to say, their enthusiasm has died suddenly. Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn to the issue of agriculture. The Finance Minister, the Honorable Member, said agriculture, forestry, and fishing sector is estimated to have expanded by 11.9% in 2022. I question the performance of this sector specific to the Borima-Waini region. I'm not doubting the performance of these sectors. What I'm doubting is the performance within my region, which I have responsibility for. Expansion and good performance of a sector can't be done in a bubble. It has not been impacting the lives of all Guyanese. and accept it. And the government must accept its areas of weaknesses. Any good government will highlight their areas of weaknesses and address them in front of the Guyanese people, and that is to say, here in the National Assembly. I wish to turn your attention, Mr. Speaker, to an article, an editorial on Budget 2023 in the Starbuck News dated Monday, January 23rd, 2023. And I quote, "The man and woman in the street continue to be at the mercy of the market prices or forces that have pumped up the cost of living, particularly since oil production began. Increased demand in the food sector associated with oil and gas industry has driven up prices for basic items, and nothing that the government has done since its terms began has had a lasting effect on easing this burden." It continues, "The impact of the rising cost of living on those who can least afford it must be evaluated, understood, and acted upon. It is intolerable that with $1 billion earned from oil in 2022, that there are deep pockets of poverty with some households struggling to afford basic food." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, we must not come to the National Assembly and boast about a performance for a few elites while the largest mass of the Guyanese people continues to struggle. That is my question. That is the issue I have with a government that continues to boast of performances, and yet you still have persons struggling. Yet we still have persons in poverty, and this is extreme poverty. Mr. Speaker, the expectation that there would have been a light at the end of the tunnel was instead allow the Guyanese people to be thrust into further darkness and despair by a so-called caring government that seems to be on the offensive against the Guyanese people. Mr. Speaker, I am moved out of necessity to ask, and in the interests of the Guyanese people, the following fundamental questions. Is this government serious about indigenous progress? Is this government serious about equitable development? But even more fundamental, Mr. Speaker, is this the one Guyana the government boasts about? Mr. Speaker, we on the opposition questions the government performance in hinterland communities. I wish to turn my attention to education. It must be recognized, Mr. Speaker, that quality education is not only about access, but it requires a reorientation of the entire system that provides skills training so that persons can respond to global needs and expectation. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I question the policies of the present government with respect to several programs as it relates to hinterland and indigenous communities. And one of them is, Mr. Speaker, the Gold Scholarship. I have a few questions for the Honorable Minister. Is the Minister aware that teachers who have enrolled on the program, Mr. Speaker, is the Minister aware that persons who have enrolled on the Gold Scholarship program from the hinterland have dropped out because of a number of factors, inclusive of internet access or no internet access, that is? Is the Minister even aware that persons who have enrolled on the CPC training program since 2022 are yet to begin the first class? Is the government aware, Mr. Speaker, that teachers who have to travel large or far distances in the interior, their travel expense surpassed 5,000 Guyana dollars on a daily basis, and they were even refused assistance from the relevant regional authorities? Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying here is that government must ensure when they are on these touring trips that they engage with the ordinary people on the street rather than meeting the elite of the RDC. And the RDC, the regional chairman, and those in high offices, they tell you what you need to hear. We want you to meet the Guyanese people and allow the Guyanese people to tell you what you should be hearing. And that is our concern. As a matter of fact, ministers, whenever they visit Mabruma, they would have meetings with 20 persons, with 40 persons. Out of the 40 persons, Mr. Speaker, 35 of them are staff of the RDC, are drivers, are handymen, are temporary workers. Meet the ordinary Guyanese people. Listen to the people. Public Works, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, several months ago, the Honorable Minister of Public Works visited Mabruma and promised the people of Barbina that they will be having a new road. We do not doubt the minister, but has the work started? Then he went forward to Wongna and initiated, in their own words, an emergency contract for the Wongna road works. Besides slush mud being spread across this road, Mr. Speaker, it has become worse with no sign of major work in progress. An emergency work, that is. As a matter of fact, it's only after several posts on Facebook and being bombarded by the RDC, and I was told by a minister through a phone call, only then the contractor decided that he will start moving some of the equipment to this emergency location. Mr. Speaker, what I want to highlight here is this is the issue. One person is being awarded several contracts. As a matter of fact, 95% of the contracts in Region 1. And this person is the common law husband of the regional vice chairperson. Then you have a brother of the said contractor living in Mabruma who controls part of the contracts there. If that's not enough, Mr. Speaker, another brother, a third brother, is a staff with responsibility at the RDC for works. And if this is what His Excellency rebutted by saying, yes, we are working for friends, families, and cronies, then this must not be. This cannot be. So, Mr. Speaker, one person being awarded several contracts cannot implement the contracts on time, and so you have works being roll over. We yet to see any major work being commenced in Mabruma since 2020. And you have, Mr. Speaker, from 2015 to 2018, while the coalition was in government, you could name roads that were done under the coalition. And if you come here to tell the Guyanese people that the coalition did nothing, then that is untruth. And I said earlier, you must come to the National Assembly to tell the people what the opposition while in government did and what you are doing better. But you will not do that because in some places across Guyana, like where I came from, it's not being done better. Mr. Speaker, I want to applaud the government for continuing one thing, and that is the coalition vision for better roads in hinterland communities. Communities in Mabruma witnessed for the first time after 1992, 28 years to Mr. Speaker. 20 odd years later, Mr. Speaker, better roads. And while they were in campaign mode, they were telling the people you cannot eat road. But yet now you come to tell the people that concrete road is the best thing in the hinterland communities. The very road that you go there and you walk, I could remember the Honorable Ben walking in Comaka on slush mud when he was the Minister of Works. And I think he fell one time in the mud, the Honorable Minister then. Slush mud, Mr. Ben. You could go there now, you won't fall, thanks to the APNO government. Indigenous development, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is a known fact that Guyana is poised for economic takeoff. And that the extent to which we can do so is dependent on the choices we make and our ability to collectively harness the skills and talents of our people in a bid to achieve progress and development. The allocation for developments in the hinterland and indigenous communities seems to be a well-regurgitated script from previous budget. That's not an issue, Mr. Speaker. The issue is the policies of the programs largely benefited the people. Has it actually become a reality in many cases? We question the government to provide the answer. I'm sure the Honorable Minister coming after me, the Honorable Sonia Parag, will try to bring some clarity or answers to some of the questions. The preeminent focus of the government on ICT, indigenous land titling, solar energy, sustainable land management are all very important, Mr. Speaker.
And very important for you to get an extension to conclude.
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Speaker. I do ask that the Honourable Member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honourable Member Mr. Jones. Honourable Member, you may continue to conclude.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to turn my attention a little bit to the part-time job program through which we see the good in its conception. However, this project is, in some views of the Guyanese populace, counterproductive. It will be far more effective if those persons receive training to enhance their skills and employment prospects, rather than simply being paid a bribe for votes as it may be described. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the Honorable Member, Mr. Charlie, could help me to understand when his time comes to speak, Mr. Speaker. But I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, emphasis must be placed on training for these youths. It is too often that these youths are not aware of their mandate, they're not being trained, they're not being exposed. So I question, when this program comes to an end, what next? Or is it they'll be continuing to pay these persons as a bribe for their votes? Yes, Mr. Speaker, like every other Guyanese, I am entitled, I have applied, I have met the criteria, and I was awarded. But I want to say one thing. Unlike many of the other Guyanese indigenous people, they don't have the privilege like me to call the Honorable Minister on her phone to help facilitate a scholarship. So they will not be getting any if they can't do that. Is that what we have to get at? Is that what we have to get at? Because I could recall bringing this topic in the National Assembly, and then the following year, the Honorable Minister met me to say, I didn't know you were speaking about yourself, and I didn't know that it was you who applied. But now that I know, now you can get it. Oh, that's how things must go in this country. Those who are listening, and thank you, the Honorable Member, Mr. Damla, for raising the issue. Every Guyanese people, or every young person in Guyana, does not have that privilege. Mr. Speaker, the indigenous people proposes I just want to touch a little bit on the carbon credits, Mr. Speaker, as I close. The indigenous people, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the HES signing of carbon credits, as is largely related to the indigenous people of Guyana, we would like to see what we call a governing board established by the National Two-Shows Council, one with an oversight committee that will monitor the execution of this fund. It must not be directly managed by the minister or simply by central government. Mr. Speaker, again we propose, Mr. Speaker, that the shows of the various villages across Guyana must have a say. And so that is why we are including the National Two-Shows Council. Obviously they are, and they represent a large percent of the populace, which is 10% of all of Guyana, the indigenous populace. Mr. Speaker, as I close, the budget speech reported inflation at 7.2% for 2022. I want to quote Ram and Macrae in their analysis, which titled Focus on Guyana's National Budget 2023, and it states, quote, "It is the highest rate of inflation in the past 20 years. Mr. Speaker, in a recent editorial as well, which shows significant higher prices of the actual expense that a Guyanese will pay when they visit the market. The question here, Mr. Speaker, is what exactly has the government done to alleviate the hardship of these Guyanese persons? Old age pension, Mr. Speaker, should have been increased to 40,000 Guyana dollars. Public assistance, Mr. Speaker, should have been increased to $25,000. Public servants, Mr. Speaker, should have received an increase ranging from 10 to 20% on an average annual income basis. Mr. Speaker, a budget for the people must be one which directly strengthens their efforts to combat poverty, be able to have reliable access to sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food while meeting their other daily needs. And if this budget is one that will allow that, then I commend it. However, Mr. Speaker, as all my colleagues have already said, the budget has some loopholes. And until those can be addressed, Mr. Speaker, we cannot support this budget 2023. I thank you.